Upper Shoalhaven Landcare Council is providing resourcing for Alice McGlashan, who's an expert in making and installing and monitoring nest boxes for birds and mammals in our region. And we're really pleased to have her do these 3 series of videos. This first one will be on making boxes, which are targeted to different species within our region. And then the following videos she'll focus on installing them and tips on where best to put them within paddock trees or bush or whatever you have on your place. And then finally the importance of monitoring to see how the animals are taking to your nest boxes. With that, I'll hand over to Alice. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I've brought along a whole range of the different nest boxes that I have installed on my property in Wombourne, near Bungendore, also near Canberra, and they get pretty much fully occupied depending on the species, on and off year round. So I'm just going to add an introductory clip of all the different species that use my nest boxes on the property, collated over the last couple of years. hope you enjoyed those video clips. So not all animals use tree hollows, and I've had a look at the different species that use hollows in the Upper Shoalhaven Landcare catchment area, and they include a variety of owls and ducks and parrots, so bilbrook owls, powerful owls. If you've got tall wet sclerophyll eucalypt forests, then you might have masked and sooty owls. Also owlet nightjars, Australian owlet nightjars, they sleep in tree hollows too. Teal and Pacific black ducks, wood ducks, all nest in tree hollows. The parrots have got gang cockatoos, galahs, sulphur-crested cockatoos, long-billed and short-billed corellas, rainbow lorikeets, king parrots, superb parrots, crimson and eastern rosellas. Also some of the little grass parrots too, red-runt parrots. Sacred kingfishers also nest in tree hollows, as do kookaburras, and dollar birds. 3 different kinds of tree creepers. The white-throated tree creeper is the most common around here, but also the brown tree creeper and red-browed tree creeper. Also little southern white faces, striated and spotted pardalotes, grey shrike thrush sometimes use tree hollows to nest in. Tree martins use tree hollows. And then the mammal species, we've got a couple of different antechinus species. Eastern pygmy possums, yellow-bellied gliders, greater gliders, if you're so lucky. Generally they like taller wet eucalypt forests. Sugar gliders and squirrel gliders. Sugar gliders are very common all around the area. Feather-tailed gliders, if you've got Banks ears on your property, you might have feather-tailed gliders. Brush-tailed possums, ring-tailed possums, and microbats. So they're the whole range of local native species that use tree hollows, either for sleeping by day, a lot of the mammals, or for birds. Mostly they nest in them, but the owls will sleep in them by day as well. So of the bird species, most of those will only nest in tree hollows. So if there aren't any tree hollows around, then they've got no ability to nest and have families. Got a range of different nest boxes here. I'll just talk you through the different designs and show you what's inside too. These have all been used by the different pictured animals, so I'll give you a bit of a squiz of what the inside looks like too. Right here. So at the end here, I've got a beautiful kookaburra nest box design. This has been used now for 3 years in a row. They're chicks from last year, 3 kookaburras, and there's mum or dad feeding chicks, hopefully, with a snake. That was a bit hopeful. It was a bit too big for them. So inside they have a lot of bits of bones from mammals and beetle bits and pieces. I think there's a dead skink in here somewhere. So that's, yeah, kookaburra nest box. This next nest box is used by sugar gliders on my property, but it's actually a tree creeper nest box design. And this one's been used twice now for 2 seasons by a white-throated tree creeper. So inside this one, it's a bit chopped up at the moment. It's been transported a little bit, but they make a little woven nest inside, and I had wood shavings there to start with as well. This nest box is actually, this one here, is actually an owlet nightjar design nest box, but it's been taken over by sugar gliders on my property. They think it's pretty awesome. And sugar gliders, how you can tell if a sugar glider is using a nest box is see those deep layer of eucalypt leaves. Usually it's in a bit of a coil around that way, and there's a sugar glider in the middle. This one's been transported, so it's a bit shaken up. This nest box here, just trying to keep the shadow out of the way. This design is for barn owls, but they really like the front perch entrance. But on my property, the wood ducks absolutely love this design. So if you can see down below, that's the duckling leaping out of the nest box, called by mum below. This family had 19 ducklings one year and a clutch of wood duck eggs. So inside this nest box, usually the ducks don't add down until after they've laid all their eggs and nothing's stolen the eggs. So this one I've left in the hatched eggshells and a nice deep layer of wood shavings underneath for them the eggs to sit on without getting cracked. this nest box. There's 3 in a row here. These ones here, they're Rosella and smaller parrot or Rosella design nest boxes. Those 2 are the same, but I've just brought them along to demonstrate that this design also in my property is enjoyed by ringtail possums. 2 are occupied by ringtails and some are occupied by Rosellas. This is a slightly smaller, this one, parrot design as well. So it's had several successful families, Eastern Crimson Rosellas. Yeah, and bedding inside wood shavings. And this one you can tell it's been occupied by a ringtail possum. They add the curl of bark and they like a bit of bedding inside as well. The surface of the nest box is pretty hard otherwise. And this nest box unfortunately was raided last spring by sugar gliders, but if you can see inside, that's the kind of bedding that a Rosella would leave, just a scattering of feathers, kind of like garnishes on top, and they chew up the bedding. You need to put bedding inside, I'll discuss that shortly, and they have little white rounded eggs like that. This one at the end, this nest box, is a larger parrot design, so a galah or a corella, or also is the size that brush-tailed possums really enjoy. And this nest box down below here is a special design by Drew Leaper in East Gippsland. It's for greater gliders. So the idea is the nest box is installed this side against the tree, and the greater glider climbs up the tree and goes into the top of the nest box from straight from the tree. So that's a bit of just to talk through a whole variety of different nest box designs. It's not really a situation of where one side fits all. As you can see, all sorts of different animals have different needs, and the designs have been tried and tested over the years by researchers across the country to figure out what the different particular needs are of each species. So in terms of making your own nest boxes, there are a few really important things to consider that mean the difference between a nest box being occupied, lasting for many years, and being able to clean it out or fix it later, and having it fall out of a tree, be difficult to access and not being used, that kind of thing. So the number one most important thing for nest boxes is what to make them out of. So in terms of that, it's wood, or you can use plastic recycled board as well, but the wood that you use needs to be able to sit out in the weather, rain, hail, shine, frost, heat waves, and not fall apart. So that type of thing you're looking at. Hardwood is kind of number one, very heavy, hard to get, not a very sustainably harvested resource. So number 2 is marine ply or external grade ply. And what you're after, have a think about a tree hollow is generally quite thick wood. So if you use very thin ply, cold and heat come through easily. So if it's a possum trying to stay warm in winter, thin ply will be very, very cold. And in summer, thin ply will basically transmit the heat. The heat will come straight through. So what you're after is a thick kind of 15 to 17 mil or thicker wood product, marine or external grade ply. If you can, hardwood, like recycled hardwood fence posts, that type of thing, but strong. Down from there, if you're in an area that doesn't have lots of borers like termites, that doesn't have lots of wet weather, piners won't last as long, but it can do the job, and that's kind of what you're after. So I wouldn't recommend using form ply. It's got that really thick, slippery, it's got the slippery plastic coating on the outside or inside. It's also black, so it heats up, and there isn't really any natural tree surface that's that slippery. So an animal might struggle either to get into the nest box and fall off and injure itself from a height, or it might struggle to get out of a nest box, which is neither what you want. So I'd strongly recommend against using form ply, external grade or marine ply or hardwood, or if you're in a place that doesn't have lots of moisture and lots of termites, then pine as well is an option. It just won't last as long. So the next important thing is the actual design itself. So if you have a think about, it's going to be out in the weather, and you might want to look inside sometimes, or change out the bedding, or maintain it a bit. So having a lid that opens is a good thing, but it's not compulsory. However, I would recommend that having the lid that opens to the back, the tree trunk there, will always mean that the lid can't wide open and stay open, and the gravity will make it close. If you have a lid that opens from the front, then if it blows open or an animal pushes it open, that's it, it's open to the weather, and the nest box isn't really usable. So definitely have your lid to the back. Another design feature is if you have the nest box, the lid sloping down to the front, then water doesn't pool at the back. It comes off quickly off the nest box when it's raining, and if you have a 4mm thereabouts overhang at the front, it protects the front entrance from having rain come inside versus no overhang at all. And if you can have a bit of an overhang all around the top of the nest box, then that means that when water sheds, it doesn't shed into the nest box and also cause degradation of your edges, your cut edges. Another feature is your nest box is bound to get some water in at some point. Also, the lid might fail, it might get a lot of water in, might be a really nasty storm and rain is going horizontally, so you need it to drain. The recommendation is a hole in each of the 4 corners, so no matter which angle the nest box is leaning, always the bottom point will drain water out. If there's no drainage hole, then it can happen that the nest box will fill up with water, and if there's any eggs or chicks inside, they'll drown. In terms of hole size, just a small hole, enough to drain water out, but not enough to let winter draftiness in. So 3mm drill bit, perfect. What else? The other thing is an animal needs to be able to get into the nest box and out of the nest box easily. Another thing to think of is if it's too easy or very, very easy to get into a nest box, say for a mammal that, like a possum, brush-tailed possum that likes to eat bird eggs, then it's very easy to get in and out, and so or a sugar glider, it's more likely to be predated on. So you kind of want to have a bit of a compromise of, you can get in and out relatively easy, but it's not kind of so easy that a possum will come past every day and check inside. So especially for the bird nest boxes. So parallel cut grooves, say 2 to 3mm deep, like this, on the outside and on the inside of the front panel, because animals need to get up from the inside as well as the outside. And often if you're using ply, the surface of ply is marine ply, for example, or hardwood ply, is quite hard for small claws to purchase, and no natural tree trunk is that slick and smooth. So you need to give it animals something to purchase on, especially if you think young chicks, the first time they leave the nest box, they're not very strong, they don't have strong muscles, so they need a bit of help to get in and out. So the other option is, instead of cut grooves like this, you can have panels like this, inside and out. But if you do that, make sure that you do it such a way that if a corella or a galah comes by and decides to have a bit of a go at it, it doesn't take it off, and then there's no way to access the nest box. If you do add a branch, then add the grooves on as well underneath, because if the branch gets chewed off by something and there's nothing there in place, if the branch is gone, then it's got no easy access for animals. Overhang, climbing grooves, drainage holes. And the last thing is, if you're making for yourself, and our next kind of key thing is, how do I install my nest box? How do I make it so that it's ready to install? There's this great design by Hollylog Homes. It's called the Habishaw system, and it means you can install a nest box without needing to drill holes in a tree, so you don't damage the tree. It stretches as the tree grows, and it's relatively quick and easy to install and uninstall when you decide to change the location of the nest box. But just quickly, that's what it looks like. It's a single piece of wire that goes through the back of the nest box, like that through the back. So one piece, there's no attachments, it's just a hole in both sides of the nest box through and through. One side has a loop that you feed the wire through, and the other side is free like that you feed, and it goes round the trunk of the tree. Now, if you have, you want to use really thick wire, it needs to be fencing wire thickness, so 3 mil to 3.5 mil thick. And if you can buy the polycarbonate plastic coated wire, then it kind of sticky frictions to the tree trunk, and then it bears the weight kind of evenly around the tree. But if you can use fencing wire, but because fencing wire is slippery, you need to add a piece of hose around the back of the tree where most of the weight's being borne, otherwise it eats into the tree trunk. And then for that style, you need to probably install it on a fork or something like that, because it won't generally stick around a tree. So if it's fencing wire, you need to have a piece of green garden hose around the back. If it's a polycarbonate plastic coated wire, just the wire itself like that is perfect. And the last thing in terms of what you make your nest boxes out of is the components need to be things that won't rust in salty air near the coast or lots of rain. It's going to be out in all weather. So the components like hinges, the hinges need to be either brass or stainless steel, so not the nickel plated hinges, they'll rust in no time. You want the hinge to be able to last 20 years out in the weather. The other components are generally nails. Often don't hold the structure together up a tree, and they'll cause a nest box to fail. So you're after galvanized or stainless steel screws, external quality screws, to put your nest box together. And then if you ever need to do any repairs, you can easily take the screws out, replace a panel, paint it whichever you want. So those are the other two important parts of nest box components. And if you can, for the smaller nest boxes that are designed for not brush-tail possums, there have been a few researchers find that brush-tails can learn to open the lids and go inside. So if you can add a latch or 2 screws and a piece of wire that's just tied around so that it stops the lid from being opened. So apparently brush-tails learn to open the lids. And then a snack box, check inside, eat chicks and eggs. So a latch, it doesn't have to be a fancy latch, just 2 screws and a bit of wire will do the trick. Now you've finished your nest box and it's all constructed, have a think about the other big important thing that will help your nest box survive out in the weather for a lot longer is a surface treatment. So if you put the raw wood out or the plywood, it'll maybe last 5, 10, 15 years depending on the quality of the wood product. But if you add a surface coating like a paint or an oil, then it'll significantly increase the longevity of your nest box if it's well constructed and made from quality materials. So my preference is to paint with paints and water-based paint, because paint lasts for a long time. You do it well once and it'll survive in the weather for 10, 15, 20 years. The other option is using an edible grade oil, but oils need to be applied, they vaporize and sink in. So oils need to be applied every 2-3 years to keep the coverage up, and that's just too high maintenance in my books for uninstalling nest boxes and retreating them. So it's an option for you, but if you choose to go with paints, it needs to be a water-based paint, so less toxic, and an external grade that will last out in rain, hail, shine, so not an internal cheap paint. And the other key thing is that you need to use a pale colour, because if you use a dark colour like dark green or dark brown or black, then it'll absorb the heat from the sun if there's any sun hitting it, and especially in the heat of the day, and it'll cause a nest box to be potentially a death trap or a hot box for the internal occupants. So you basically want to radiate the sunshine off it, and a pale colour does that. The other thing about painting is that you can match the nest box to the surrounding colours of your forest. to make it less likely to be spotted by a predator that might think, hey, snack pack, what's inside? Eggs, right. Next nest box, there's one. So if you paint it similar colour to either the tree trunks, or if the tree trunks are dark, pick a pale variation of that, or a variation of the leaf litter, or of the leaves, or a blend of all of the above, and make it a pale colour, particularly if you're in an open canopy type habitat. So what I do with painting is I do an undercoat of an actual undercoat type paint, and then I do 2 or 3 very thickly applied. You're not trying to make it change colour, you're actually kind of adding a thick glue-like substance to the surface of the nest box to protect it from the weather as much as you can. And for both oiling and paint, only do the outside of the nest box. The inside will get chewed. If it's oils, it'll get on the feathers of birds and mammals. And the insides don't need protection, they generally stay pretty pristine. So here's a few examples of my paint jobs painted next to my trees. This one here matched the colour of my tree trunks. So you can have a bit of fun. I generally use a base coat of woodland grey, I think it is, flooded gum. And then I get the little sample pots of other colours and do them over the top. You can get some cheap paints in the mist tints area of some of the big hardware shops. Sometimes you can get external grade quality paints at like 20% the wholesale, like the actual price, so it's a good place to look. And also if you get a mist tint that's kind of vaguely the colour pale, you can always get another mist tint that's a bit darker of something else and mix the colours up and get the colour that you want. Yeah, so that's a good option. Right. Your nest box, when you install it, really does need some bedding. If you have a think about a natural tree hollow, stay there. Tree hollow is a decaying hole inside a tree. It'll have, soft base of decayed wood that's been decayed from insects chewing and fungus and all sorts. So it's not really anything like a rock solid hard wood surface that's inside of a nest box. So if you think about a possum bottom or a bird nesting sleeping during the day, or fragile eggs being laid on top of a really solid nest box base with a parent coming and going while they're laying. Most parrots don't actually add feathers at all, or many feathers to the nest boxes. So if you don't add bedding, you run the risk of wood ducks as well. Their eggs get cracked when they're coming and going. You run the risk of it being mightily uncomfortable place to sleep for a possum, or having eggs crack and clutches fail from cracked eggs because there's no soft surface and the eggs get cracked because of the hardwood surface. So to think about in terms of trying to emulate as much as possible what the base of a nest box would be, wood tends to kind of have antimicrobial properties. It doesn't tend to go really mouldy or slushy or gross. It also tends to not support parasites as much, so mites and lice, that type of thing. So if you try and stick as closely as possible to wood products, my preference is wood shavings. You can buy it in big bags at pet shops. Also tan bark, so pine bark, or wood chip, but not chemically treated anything, because inside the nest box things will eat it. If it's birds, there'll be wet poop and it'll get dissolved and be absorbed by the chick's skin, that kind of thing. So chemical free. Avoid using leaf litter from different places, because if you leaves don't really absorb moisture, and they don't really add much cushioning like the decaying bottom of a tree hollow would. And if you're giving nest boxes to someone else and you use leaf litter from one place and it goes somewhere else, you could be transferring weed seeds across, so avoid that. Another common, other bedding that people might think of using is sugarcane mulch or straw, but sugarcane mulch and straw, when they get wet, they get really mouldy and gross. And nest boxes from time to time will get water in them or poop in them, and it'll create a mouldy, dusty, toxic environment from other birds sitting in there. So definitely a wood-based product is your preference. I hope that answers most of your questions about making nest boxes, installing and constructing nest boxes, and what types of material to use and bedding to use also. If you're after some nest box designs, I've got a booklet online on nest box tails. It's got covers most of the common hollow using species, and there's species lists in the booklet as well. I've also made a materials and key design features booklet that covers pretty much all of those topics about what to make your nest box from, what not to use, that type of thing. So have a look on nest box tails, and there's a couple of PDFs, you download them, and it's also websites so you can scroll through and have a look at the pretty pictures as well. Enjoy!